Good morning. We start this informational webinar to discuss the Sunflower Foundation's latest request for proposal in support of capacity building. After many months of planning, we're excited to be here with you today talking about capacity building. My name is Brandon Skidmore. I'm a program officer with the Foundation, and I'm serving as the primary contact for questions regarding this RFP. I'm joined today by Cheryl Bean, Chief Financial and Operating Officer, Phil Cawthon, Director of Communications. So first, a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We'll present for about 30 minutes, during which time everyone's lines will be muted. We'll then open things up for questions related to the requirements as outlined in the RFP. Please reserve for email any questions that you have that are more specific to your individual organizations. And we'll be happy to do our best to answer your questions this morning, and certainly any that are received via email in the coming weeks. So until we're ready to dive into questions, again, everyone is muted to prevent ambient noise from going out to everyone. If you're joining by phone only, a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available later today on the Foundation's website at sunflowerfoundation.org. For those not familiar with the Foundation, we were created in 2000 as part of a $75 million settlement between Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, then Kansas Attorney General Carla Stovall, and then Kansas Insurance Commissioner Kathleen Sebelius. The settlement resolved disputes between the parties concerning Blue Cross's charitable assets from company operations spanning from 1941 to 1969. Since its inception, the Sunflower Foundation has worked behind the scenes in Kansas, directing resources toward helping people and communities achieve and maintain optimal health. Subscribing to the principle that capacity is the infrastructure that allows an organization to fulfill its mission and strengthen its impact, the Foundation looks to continue its efforts, which began in 2002, to provide nonprofits access to funds to support critical organizational needs. The Capacity Building RFP provides support to nonprofit organizations to address organizational needs and accelerate approaches in three priority areas: technology, training and education, and media messaging and communication. The RFP includes examples of projects that might be undertaken to build capacity and grow impact in the three priority areas. These examples are not intended to prompt, define, or limit an applicant's proposed strategy. Please note that the training and education priority is directly related to building or improving the internal capacity of a nonprofit organization. And media messaging and communication is focused on two very specific strategies as outlined in the RFP. One, to enhance or develop an organization website, or two, to increase staff knowledge and skills to optimize use of social media. It is expected that applicants creatively assess and identify the priority area that truly addresses their most urgent capacity building needs. We're excited to announce that the Sunflower Foundation is migrating to a new cloud-based grants management system. Access to the new online application portal will be available through the Foundation's website beginning January 10th. All applicants are required to create a new account and submit their applications via this online system. We certainly realize this is a busy time of year, and we hope the early release of the RFP is helpful as you plan for this opportunity and begin drafting your proposals prior to the launch of our new system. As a reminder, the RFP includes a copy of the questions which mirror the online application. Please check to make sure your application is complete before submission. The budget and budget narrative forms will be provided as part of the application. Other forms and supporting documents, such as bids, audit, and financial information, should be uploaded by the applicant as part of the final submission process. Now let's take a few minutes to talk about the specifics of the capacity building RFP. This opportunity provides funding to support implementation of short-term strategies designed to build core organizational strength by increasing effectiveness and/or efficiency, quality, safety, and sustainability. Capacity building grants are intended for organizations that do not have significant resources, endowments, or other assets that could be used to build their organizational capacity. Preference will be given to nonprofit organizations who predominantly serve vulnerable populations and can be described as a safety net organization, health and social service organizations whose primary focus is health equity, social justice, and/or addressing the social and economic factors that influence people's health, a local health department or public health organization, or aging or disability organization. The Venn diagram illustrated on this slide illustrates the type of opportunity and organization that this RFP is designed for. Successful applicants will accurately describe their strategic need, detailing how the proposed work will assist the organization in fulfilling its mission. Successful applicants will accurately outline a financial need, illustrating a lack of assets and resources or access to an endowment or other funds which could otherwise support the proposed work, and make clear that the organization is routinely focused on serving and providing outreach to a vulnerable Kansas population. Applicant organizations must meet one of the following: be a tax-exempt status under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Service, or an instrumentality of state or local government, provided that Sunflower Foundation support will not supplant projects that would be considered core responsibilities of that government agency or organization. Please note that Sunflower Foundation grants can only support services provided in Kansas or for Kansans. If an organization is based in or provides services in another state, prorated support of the proposed project to build organizational capacity will be considered, only if documentation is provided to verify the percentage of services provided in Kansas or for Kansas. Organizations with an active Sunflower Foundation grant are not excluded from applying. However, priority consideration may be given to organizations without a current Sunflower Foundation grant. Grant awards, use of funds, and reporting. First, we encourage you to determine the overall cost of the project you wish to implement. So, for example, if the total projected budget for your project is $40,000, then you may wish to request the maximum $30,000 from the foundation, leaving $10,000 or 25% as your contribution or match. Or if your project budget might be in the neighborhood of $11,000, in this case you may request $10,000 from the foundation, leaving $1,000 or 10% as your contribution or match. All proposals must include a cash match of at least 10%. Most cash expenditures by the applicant organization or from other sources of funding that directly contribute to the cost of the proposed project qualify as a cash match. Those sources which do not qualify as match are highlighted on this slide. For those on the phone, it includes general operating or overhead expenses, staff salaries and benefits, and in-kind contributions. The next three slides highlight expenses which are not allowable under this RFP. They include personnel expenses, construction or renovation costs, medical equipment, healthcare equipment or supplies, program expenses, general operating expenses, electronic health record systems, although enhancements to existing systems will certainly be considered, fundraising campaigns, events or materials, routine continuing education such as licensure and accreditation, individual health care or support, web hosting, subscription, and multi-platform app development. Grant projects are expected to be completed within 1 year from the date of award. Grantees will be asked to complete project reports at the 6 and 12-month marks. So what happens next? If you've not had an opportunity, please take a few minutes to read the capacity building RFP. Determine the priority strategy that addresses your organization's most urgent capacity building need. Review the application's questions, which are included in the RFP, and begin drafting your responses. Consider your budget needs and begin drafting budget and budget narratives. Start assembling your application materials, including bids, audits, financial information, and create an account and begin populating the online application through the Foundation's website beginning January 10th. And finally, submit your application on or before the February 15th deadline. So with that, we're going to open things up for questions. A reminder that we have people joining us both via webinar and on conference call. We're going to start with those on the webinar. So if you have a question, please raise your hand by pressing the hand icon in the webinar dashboard. We can then unmute you one at a time for your question. We'll take a minute or so here to see if we have any questions coming in via the webinar.
Question from Rachel Jefferson, and we'll unmute her now. Rachel, can you hear us? Give Rachel just a second to see. Well, her question is coming in over chat. Will a copy of the PowerPoint be available?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yes. We will make a copy of the PowerPoint available.
All participants are unmuted. Hand raising is off.
Okay. We have another question from Chrisanne Grund. Are there funding restrictions for a project which may have missions element to it?
Chrisanne, can you hear us to where you could maybe expand on that question a little bit?
Okay, we'll continue reading questions off the chat until we get the audio going. Okay, from Robin Cole, can your grant application be a combination of technology, training, and education, and media messaging?
Good question. So we are really encouraging applicant organizations to pick their largest need at this point, to select one of the 3 priorities in which to apply for funding. And so the answer would be, please select the priority that is the largest need for your organization currently.
Chrisanne Grund clarified her question. The group I am thinking of wants to work with physicians who wish to conduct charitable missions work overseas.
So I'm not sure that I still completely fully understand the question, Chrisanne, but the goal here is organizational capacity building, a way for the organization to build the capacity to either serve more or serve in a more efficient manner. It's not really supposed to be for programmatic support. And if that's not helpful or makes your if that doesn't answer your question, we can certainly chat offline.
And maybe another aspect to that also could be that remembering the funding is directed for work in Kansas or for those impacting Kansas. So any applicant will need to make sure that that they adequately explain that as well.
Pause here for a second just to see if we have any callers on the conference call line with questions. Okay, then we have a few more questions in the chat. From Kristen McGinney, can the hiring of outside consultants to lead a training for our organization qualify as an allowable program expense?
Yes. We're also encouraging organizations who are seeking services or purchasing goods to include bids with their applications. So please be sure to do that if you're using consulting services.
From Rachel Jefferson, can we meet with the foundation to review possible grant projects?
I'm sorry, who was it from?
Rachel Jefferson.
Hi, Rachel. We're not opposed to having the conversation to kind of bounce some ideas. Unfortunately, I don't think it's probably feasible for us to meet with all of the potential applicants because we do anticipate a large response to this. We're happy to bounce ideas or listen to a couple of ideas or respond to email. I'm not sure that meeting would facilitate a better response than just response by email.
Melissa Gallegos asks, does an organization have to be health-based, or can the project have health components to qualify for funding?
I would certainly point any organization to the Venn diagram, which is included in the RFP and is included on the slides. So while we have a preference of the organizations that we are looking to fund in this RFP, really it comes down to how well applicants can describe their strategic need, the financial need, and their direct connection to a vulnerable population in the state.
Ben Alexander asks, some of our planned technology needs are concurrent with an office renovation project, such as running Ethernet cables and so on. How should we separate those needs, which I assume are excluded as construction, from the rest of our technology needs?
Hi, Ben. This is Cheryl. I think the best thing that I would recommend would be to, as you get bids and work with your IT professionals and contractor, they should be able to easily break those two things out. Because really what we are looking for is the hardware or software component, understanding that it takes the construction around it at times, but they should be easily able to break that out as you go through a bid process.
Question from Michael Webb. The RFP presumes that our organization already has a strategic plan. How much documentation do you need of our organization's strategic plan?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Michael. So the strategic plan really comes into the element where you're talking about and describing the strategic need and how well the project that you're proposing fits in with the long-term goals of the organization and how it's helping you fulfill your mission. So we did not require or mandate an upload of a strategic plan, but we are asking applicants to describe in their narrative how the proposal that they're putting forward fits with the needs of their organization and helps them fulfill their long-term mission. So it's not a requirement that you provide us your strategic plan, but we will need to see through the proposal process your documentation and description for how the strategic need fits with the financial need and the population that you're serving, and helps the organization move forward to achieving its long-term mission.
Claudette Humphrey asks, for example, would funding for computers to establish an employment assistance for clients in our homeless prevention program be an allowable funding request?
Claudette, that's actually a really great question, and it might be something that is better discussed offline. Initially, I would say that sounds more as programmatic and not organizational capacity building, but it might be best if we have a little bit more information, and since it's a specific question to your project, if we could either communicate via email or after the call, I would probably recommend that.
Christine Hyman has a question. Can you define what is meant by a multi-platform app?
So basically what we're saying is we're not providing funds to develop an app that you would use in any capacity. So looking at that last priority category of media messaging and communication, we have specifically asked for applicants to narrow their proposal to two areas, which is one, developing or enhancing their organizational website, or two, increasing knowledge staff use of social media. So as you're looking at that third priority category as a possible area to apply in, please draft and contain your proposals around those two priority strategies.
Michelle Morgan asks, is it permissible to budget for new staff to start a program to provide more services, for example, startup costs? I'm going to repeat the question. Is it permissible to budget for new staff to start a program to provide more services, such as for startup costs?
That's a really good question, and actually one of the specific exclusions is staffing, unless it is additional staff hours directly related to a capacity project that wouldn't otherwise be in existence. For example, if you have a part-time IT person who works 20 hours a week, and for a short time they have to work 25 hours a week to implement the project, we would consider those 5 additional hours, but for the most part, staff is a pretty across-the-board exclusion.
Alexis Fox asks, if our organization is based in KC, Missouri, but roughly 25% of our participants are Kansans, would the prorated grant be 25% of the budget?
That is exactly right. So based on the population of Kansans you serve, we would fund up to that percent, again taking into consideration that there's also a 10% cash match requirement, which would have to be considered part of that, not a match of what you're doing for the Missouri-based population you serve.
Rachel Jefferson asks, is there technical assistance available?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Technical assistance for developing the application, or if you could expand on that, I'd appreciate it.
Rachel says yes for developing the application.
That is really something that would be nearly impossible for us to support. because again, we do anticipate a large response to this RFP. We're happy to, again, listen to ideas or if you have specific questions, but it would not be something that we'd be able to support as far as technical assistance.
Michael Webb has a follow-up. Can a coalition of nonprofits submit a proposal for developing their interagency capacity?
Michael, that's actually a really good question. On the surface, I don't see any concern with that. We might want to ask a follow-up question if we could maybe talk offline, but on the surface, it does build the capacity of your organization. The key to that is we would want to make sure that an appropriate 501c3 organization was the lead fiscal sponsor and had the capacity to implement it.
Rachel Jefferson had a follow-up too. For smaller organizations, can monies be used for board development?
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, funding can be used for board development.
Melissa Gallegos asks, does radio qualify for the media priority area? Melissa, you may need to clarify that. And Dan Partridge asks, if the RFP is on your website, the direct link for that is sunflowerfoundation.org/RFPS. sunflowerfoundation.org/RFPs. Connie Zeinkowitz asks, do you anticipate a certain number of awardees?
That's actually a really good question and a question that is really difficult to answer. We don't anticipate a certain number of our awards. We have a range for what we are planning to potentially award, but it's all going to come down to the quality of the applications and how well they respond to the RFP criteria. So while we could say we're going to award $500,000 or $700,000, we won't fund it if we don't receive the requested applications that meet the criteria.
Melissa clarified her radio question to say such as radio advertising. Would that be allowed?
No, unfortunately, advertising, whether radio or any other format, is something that we consider an operational expense. And it could be a programmatic expense as well, but not something that we would fund under capacity.
As far as the chats go, we are down to the last question, and it's a pretty open-ended one, but I will let Brandon and Cheryl have a shot at it. Can you list examples of allowable expenses?
Well, I would certainly point everyone to the actual RFP. We have a table that has example allowable expenses under each of the 3 priority areas that we are funding under this RFP. So under technology, we have several bullets listed there, training and education, and then again in media messaging and communication. I won't go through all of those because they're there for everybody to kind of download and digest. We then also have the exclusions, specific exclusions under each of those categories for things that would not be allowable expenses under each of those 3 priority areas. So again, in the table in the RFP, if you have specific questions about allowable expenses, certainly email us after the webinar today.
moment, we don't have any questions in the chat queue. So if you're waiting to ask a question, go ahead and type that in the chat box there. While we're waiting, we'll unmute the conference call line too, just to see if anybody there has a question.
All participants are muted and may not unmute themselves. All participants are unmuted. Hand raising is off.
Again, does anyone on the conference call line have a question?
All right. Well, if there are no further questions today, we certainly thank you for taking the time to join us. A reminder that a recording of the webinar along with the slide presentation will be available on our website. As always, we welcome questions via email as you work to develop your proposals. And with that, we'll sign off. Have a great holiday.